Welcome to The Explainer. Today we are going right into the events of 1915 in the Ottoman Empire. We're going to unpack the historical context, the execution of the forced marches, and, of course, the lasting geopolitical impact. So let's jump straight into the historical records and the ongoing international conversations to understand exactly what happened to the Armenian population and why this history remains so incredibly relevant today.
1.5 million. That's a staggering number, right? It represents the highest estimate of Armenians who perished between 1914 and 1923. Now, even the more conservative estimates still place the death toll at several hundred thousand. To really wrap our heads around the immense scale of this, you have to realize that before World War I, there were an estimated 2 million Armenians living in the Ottoman Empire. So by the end of this period, the entire demographic landscape of Anatolia was permanently altered. It's a massive, massive shift.
Part 1. The Ottoman Empire Context, Escalation and World War I. Okay, so to understand 1915, we need to look at how tensions built up over decades. Back in the 1890s, under Sultan Abdul Hamid II, you had the Hamidian massacres, which killed tens to hundreds of thousands of Armenians. Fast forward to 1908, the Young Turk Revolution happens, bringing a group called the Committee of Union and Progress, or the CUP, into power. Now, at first, there was actually hope for equality. But then, 1912 hits. The Balkan Wars resulted in these massive territorial and population losses for the Ottoman Empire. And this, understandably, created intense paranoia among the CUP leaders. They were terrified that the Armenians, whose homeland was viewed as the empire's literal last refuge in Anatolia, would just break away next. So by the time the empire enters World War I in 1914 on the side of Germany, that fear had completely morphed into radical nationalism. Which brings us to Part 2, the execution. Systemic deportations and death marches.
The authorities actually dismantled the Armenian community very systematically. It's a devastating three-step process. Step 1, disarm the Armenian soldiers who were already serving in the Ottoman army. They placed them into labor battalions where many were executed. This strategically removed the able-bodied men who could actually put up a fight. Step 2. On April 24, 1915, they arrested hundreds of Armenian intellectuals, politicians, and community leaders right in Constantinople. And finally, Step 3. With the community now largely defenseless and leaderless, the government issues formal orders to forcibly deport the remaining civilians. And we're talking mostly women, children, and the elderly here.
Now, the ultimate destination is a crucial piece of this puzzle. Hundreds of thousands of people were ripped from their homes in eastern Anatolia and ordered to walk. And not just a short distance, they were forced to walk up to 1,000 kilometers toward the Syrian desert, specifically targeting brutal, remote areas like Deir ez-Zor.
You have to understand, these were absolutely not just relocations. They were death marches. Imagine being actively deprived of food and water while being forced to march through incredibly harsh, mountainous terrain right in the dead of summer. It's unthinkable. Along the way, these columns of people were subjected to robbery, horrific violence, and massacres by their paramilitary escorts and local bandits. And for the folks who somehow survived those initial marches, they were funneled into 25 major open-air concentration camps near the Syrian and Iraqi frontiers. Because the Ottoman government provided basically zero facilities or supplies for this massive influx of human beings, widespread death from typhus, dysentery, starvation, and sheer physical exhaustion just swept through both the marching columns and the camps.
Just look at this stark quote from contemporary accounts. It really highlights the extreme reality these deportees faced once they actually reached those camps. S.S. McClure, writing in his book Obstacles to Peace, documented how some of these camps were essentially used as mass burial or extermination zones. The historical sources detail just horrific things, instances of mass burnings, drownings in the Black Sea, and even systemic poisonings by certain medical officials. It is an incredibly grim subject, I know, but it is a thoroughly documented part of the historical record of these marches.
Moving on to Part 3, the position of Turkey, a century of dispute.
So this is where we see a very stark international divide on how to officially classify these events. On one side, the international academic consensus, and this includes groups like the International Association of Genocide Scholars, they define this as a state-sponsored systematic genocide, essentially an intentional plan by the Young Turks. But on the flip side, the official position of the Republic of Turkey argues something very different. They state that these deaths were the result of the general turmoil of World War I, widespread interethnic warfare, and disease during wartime relocations, rather than a pre-planned state extermination. They emphasize that the Ottoman Empire was collapsing at the time and actively fighting on multiple fronts. Regardless of where you personally stand, understanding this deep divide is absolutely essential to grasping the modern geopolitical landscape.
And that brings us to part 4, global recognition and legacy, coining a term.
Now this right here is a massive takeaway. The sheer scale and historical importance of these events actually led a Polish-Jewish lawyer named Raphael Lemkin to literally coin the word genocide back in 1944. Lemkin had been heavily studying the massacres of the Armenians in the Ottoman Empire. Specifically, he was looking at the 1921 trial of an Armenian man who assassinated one of the former Ottoman leaders in Berlin. And Lemkin realized something profound. There was literally no legal word in existence to describe the intentional murder of a whole nation or ethnic group. It just didn't exist. So he combined the Greek word genos, meaning race, with the Latin suffix -cide, meaning killing. The events of 1915 directly gave the world the vocabulary we use to define the ultimate crime against humanity.
Today, exactly 34 countries officially recognize these events as a genocide. That number reflects a steadily growing international consensus over the last century, even amidst all the ongoing geopolitical complexities and the official denial from Turkey that we talked about earlier. We're seeing parliaments all around the world, from the United States to France and Switzerland, passing resolutions to formally acknowledge this historical record.
So I want to leave you with this thought to consider. The history we've unpacked in this explainer today isn't just dusty past events. It is the literal foundation of modern international humanitarian law. When we look back at the brutality of those marches, the sheer scale of the human loss, and this intense century-long debate over what to even call it, we really have to ask ourselves, how does our understanding of this specific, defining history influence our ability to protect vulnerable populations in the modern world? Thank you for joining me for this explainer. Keep questioning, keep learning, and I'll catch you next time.